Welcome to Creative Women Today, sponsored by the National League of American Penwomen, Fairfield County Branch, and featuring interviews with professional writers, artists, composers, filmmakers, all women who are currently involved in the creative arts.
I'm Sally Fine, and I'm honored today to have with us Carlyle Chaudruc who is an artist and experienced in sales marketing, a traveler, a very interesting young woman. I'm privileged to have the honor to talk to you for half an hour. Could you enlighten us on some of your early experiences as a child maybe, and what happened over the years that made you become not only a right brain person, but a left brain person? You seem to be able to do almost anything. So can you lead us up through your life a little bit to where you are today?
Yes, thank you. That's a very generous introduction.
You're welcome.
As a child, my family encouraged creativity. We always had paper around. My father was in the paper business, and then continuing on in school, I enjoyed sewing because my mother was a home economics major in college,
Right.
so she taught me how to sew as a child. And then moving on, once I reached college, I realized I couldn't survive as an artist. So I double majored in art history and economics as a way of having a career, an office job to help me make my art on the side. And I basically in 2001, after September 11th, realized after the tragedy in New York City where I was living at the time that I had to make a choice with my heart about my passion versus still working in an office. So made the decision to become a full-time artist at that point.
Well, you've done a lot of traveling, and more so than most people, I assume, from reading about you. Can some of your travels, I assume that maybe they had an influence on your artwork also?
Absolutely, absolutely. And really for me, the experience of seeing different cultures, visiting museums in foreign countries, visiting sacred places, holy sites around the world have really been deeply engaging for my artistic language, and I get a lot of value out of that.
Not only do you paint, but I know you've done sculpture, and that came about through a working experience. Can you tell us how you got these jobs to begin with, and how the whole interesting interweaving of the different jobs that you had to lead you into working with paint and materials and creating such beautiful things?
While I was working in an office and living in a shoebox apartment in New York City, one of the few types of paints you can use safely is watercolor. You can travel with it easily, it's packable, it doesn't off-gas the way a lot of oil paints do with the mediums that you use. It's really noxious and toxic. So it was not feasible for me to work in oils in a live-work space.
But with the fabrics, you started playing with them. And what kind of sculptures did you do with the fabric?
Right now, I just finished two large sculptural pieces. One was a teepee made of silk, and these silk pieces were sewn together in loops to suggest leaves. So much of my work involves nature, is inspired by the natural world around me. So this teepee that appears to be made of leaves is really an exploration of shelter at the edge of the forest and what it's like to be living in the woods, more or less.
Right. You mentioned nature, but do you have does music influence you, or you're reading something, or you're traveling, you're driving around, you jot down ideas? I mean, how, or do they just pop into your head? The next thing, you see something, say, I got to do that. What is the process, if you think you even have one? Maybe it's just something that explodes out of you and you do it. But is there a process that you go through before you actually start putting the paint to paper?
Yes, yes. I would say all of the above. There's not any specific place where I seek inspiration. I'm an avid museum goer and gallery visitor. I also, I wish I brought it with me, but my sketchbook where I work ideas, it comes printed so that each page is half sketchbook without any lines on it, and then the other half has lines for writing text and notes. And because I'm very right brain and left brain oriented, it helps me to have a sketchbook where I can delineate the words, descriptions, and the ideas of the visuals in addition to the visuals on the same page. Because I found my sketchbooks had a lot of words in there, and they were more journals than pictures.
Almost an outline.
Yes, and so then I started working on graph paper, and so as far as the creative development process, I find it's important to have something that helps me develop both sides of the brain.
Can you basically describe the process in doing this piece and what it's about?
Yes.
Is it interpretive? In your mind, does it have a title?
Yes. This is called Raingrass. It's from a series of 4 paintings that have a similar palette, a similar composition, that are meant to be displayed all in a row. And the colors are very watery, again suggestive of the blues and the greens and kind of the grayed down on a gray day. It's watercolor on Italian paper. The paper size is 22 by 30, Fabriano Uno from Italy. I like to work in that size. There are about 4 standard sizes I tend to work in for watercolor.
Do you do a preliminary sketch in your book before you start something like this? It doesn't seem like there's much room for mistake here.
Well, I go through many iterations of it, and I tend to work in multiples at the same time. So I won't have just one painting that I'm working on at any given time that's being stretched. I'll have 4 out, and I'll be working on 4 simultaneously. So I can't be interrupted. The phone keeps ringing if I'm in the middle of this process.
So about how long do you have before the paper starts drying? Is that
It starts drying as soon as you finish putting water on it. That's the momentum.
So that's it.
That's
because
it.
if you want to get that wet look again, you can't re-wet the paper.
You just have to rip it up and start over. Watercolor is very unforgiving that way, but
I don't think most people realize that.
Well, the serendipity then is fantastic because you get to discover new things that come out in the process. It's so unpredictable that sometimes great things happen, and sometimes terrible things.
So is this part of a series then? If you say you're working on maybe 3 or 4 at the same time, all of them have sort of the same feeling about them. It's a sort of a series.
Yes, I like to work in series.
You like to work in series. Do you like to work with certain colors? These colors they're gorgeous together.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
it has such a wonderful, relaxed feeling, yet a lot of turmoil in it at the same time with all the movement that's going on. It really draws me into the picture itself. Now, when you're working, I'm always interested in how artists go about their work. Do you listen to music while you're?
I do. I do listen to repetitive, droning kind of atmospheric music, something akin to synthesizers chanting. I find myself in really a cleaned out, meditative mental state when I'm painting, and so it's nice not to have something with too many lyrics.
Something like Enya, maybe, or like
yes,
you
yes,
if you were doing yoga, or that kind of music. This is your latest. This is what you've just done. Do you have something in mind that do you find that when you've completed one, that somewhere in there's a building of a new idea that you have
yes.
to get to?
Well, my sketchbooks
Okay.
are full of different ideas, and so I'm never at a loss. I don't suffer from a writer's block or sort of an artistic block in that way. At this point, with 2 very young children at home, I don't have enough time to devote to my artwork that I would like.
Right.
So my next project is dealing with compass roses and cartouches from maps of imagery of 17th century maps and ideas of navigation and where have I been, where am I going, what's next. These are all ideas I'm going to explore in my next series of paintings. And there will be a lot of imagery of acorns, of sugar, things that, sugar plants,
Right.
sugar cane, coming from the trade of the trade winds in the 17th century in the sugar trade. So that's sort of my next wave of paintings.
Did you touch upon any of these areas that would, Far Eastern, in your travels, were you?
Yes, I used to live down in the Caribbean in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And while there, I learned much more about the history of navigation and of trade. Again, fabric was part of that, as cotton from the south came over to Europe. And so
You've traveled the Silk Road.
I have been. I've spent some time in China too.
Right.
Yes, I have been on the Silk Road, and I find the way that ideas, visual language, it gets imparted through trade and around the world. Very fascinating, trade routes, and how commerce and art come together through imagery. These are very interesting to me.
Can you, would you say that with your business background, how does that help you being an artist? I know because most artists, when you get to that side of it, getting into galleries, presenting yourself, do you find that your background has been a lot of help to you in getting your work out there?
Yeah, I think it has been to a certain extent, but being a painter is just like somebody saying that they want to be a rock and roll star. You know, it's a 1 in a million chance, and it definitely helps me a bit, but not. It doesn't open all the doors.
Okay, do you have a website?
I do. It's carlynix.com, CarlYNIX.com, carlynix.com. So.
Right, and you have, I'm sure, examples of your work on the...
Yes, examples of my work, and also information about upcoming shows, and people can join me on Facebook and also on my website to learn about new programs I have coming up.
You have no
Yes.
cards that you make, and any other form of artwork that your artwork is in that people might be able to find?
No, I just sell original paintings and note cards with images of my seascapes from the Caribbean, but I don't have any other products at this time.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
it's been a delight talking to you. I'm sure, I hope everybody gets a chance to view your work on your website.
Thank you,
and,
Sally.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.